Man, it is so hard these days to find a pastor with a spine. It was what we need in today's culture, which is always shifting its moral values.
I wonder who's one of the best we got.
I just found the guy. He went from slightly charismatic to theonomic post-mill to Christian nationalist, and now to allegedly becoming a stone choir boy. Today we're going to talk about a man named Joel Webbon and his rise, and then his possible soon fall. Some ask, does this guy even know what he believes? We're going to focus on each of his theological shifts, and along with that comes these different associations that he has made in his rise to publicity. Which brings him to a kind of predicament now where he's walking a tightrope, and one slip could sink his platform. The rise and possible fall of Joel Webbon. Let's go. If you can just imagine being a Texas-grown boy, now doing ministry in California. Things are hot. You've got a slightly charismatic background.
The church actually started as a vineyard church.
This is the Vineyard Christian Fellowship in Anaheim, California.
So I went up to this guy and I said, when do they do it? The stuff in the Bible. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, multiply the fishes and the loaves and feed the hungry and all that stuff. When do they do that? He said, oh, we don't do that.
How am I just now finding out personally that you were in the vineyard? Did you know I was 9 years a tongue-speaking charismatic myself?
So I just went through their process for church planting. I did a church planting assessment. They assigned a guy who sat down. We had lunch together for about an hour and a half. I told him my glorious vision of doing church outside on the beach, reaching surfers, with the gospel. And and his response was, I love your heart, and he's a good guy, but I needed to hear, as a 23-year-old single male, I needed to hear more than I love your heart. I needed to hear, are you touching yourself?
You still hold to some of those kind of charismatic leanings, but you feel a burden and a calling from the Lord to go do his work and preach. So, like most in the early 2010s, what do? You go plant a church. Calvinistic, Reformed, evangelical-ish.
Our topic of discussion is beyond human comprehension. The infinite God has made a super condescension.
You're not David, all right? Your trouble in life is not Goliath.
This is this starter pack for guys in 2014 that want to go plant churches. They take themselves pretty seriously. They really believe in their hearts. They take the Bible seriously. They take preaching seriously. They take ministry seriously. They're listening to their pipers. He rolled with a lot of the same crowds that I did and do. Just the Reformed crowd. And I know what that feels like. I actually just finished a video where I talk about what that was like at that time.
The doctrine of unconditional election, as it played itself out in the world, in the apostolic authority, in no way hinders your human strategizing to reach your city.
Me and my wife remember what it's like to be a part of the Young Restless Reform movement, and especially going to plant a church. Woo. Acts 29 Network catches Joel Webbon's eye.
The place we're going, most of them could give a rip about Jesus, the gospel.
A lot of the gospel has been related to religiosity and kind of these church things you do.
It was big. Just call it as you see it. Joel Webbon's trying to do ministry. He looks over and sees X29, and where's that? So he goes over there. Interesting. I'm talking about the rise and fall of somebody. There was a podcast a few years back called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, and Mark Driscoll, Mars Hill, X29. Some similarities.
How dare you! Being like your father, Adam!
Well, when I was pastoring in Southern California, the name of the church that I pastored at the time was the Response Church, and we had a social media platform. We decided, the elders and I, to bifurcate the church's social media platform from the local church itself.
Hi, this is Pastor Joel with the Response Church. I'm joined with my wife Megan and our daughter Olive Naomi Webbon. I just wanted to give you an official invitation to join us on Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m. We meet in Point Loma, San Diego at Silvergate Elementary School. We'd love for you to come and join us sometime soon.
Because everything I think will make me happy, I'm just about always wrong. You know, I think 10 hours of free time will make me happy. You know what happens with 10 hours of free time? I get like super introspective and start pondering my own death, and then I'm depressed. You know what I mean? Like, so it turns out I'm not really the best guy at determining what makes me happy.
But obviously, we can't know what his heart was. But what I'm trying to do is be a voice for people who see this pattern of Joel noticing some kind of movement or something and moving in that direction. And people are going to ask, well, why did he do that? And at every point, you have to, according to the 9th commandment, do not bear false witness. You can't motive read, and we can't say what Joel's motives were. But what we can do is notice a pattern and say it gets harder and harder and harder to affirm that it was a sincere move toward Acts 29. It was a sincere attempt to associate himself more with Calvinistic brethren because he genuinely believed those things. And it wasn't just because Acts 29 was big and he wanted to be a part of that. All I'm saying is that it gets harder and harder throughout this story to affirm the sincerity of it. Certainly, you can say that what comes with joining Acts 29 is more networking. It's in the name, the Acts 29 network. Is that funny? Eventually, Joel Webbon says that he is tired of the wokeness in Acts 29.
And since I used to be in Acts 29, I'm going to throw Matt Chandler in there.
You're not David!
5 black guys who are either on the board or leaders in the Acts 29 network, or like Thabiti were a guest speaker for that particular conference, and Matt Chandler was the moderator. I remember Eric Mason saying, I'm so angry I can't, he was like, I don't even know where I am right now. I'm dizzy, you know, I can't even see. And I remember being angry. So I was angry.
When I left Southern California, I handed the church over. The church has since changed its name. And so the church is continuing. It's healthy there in Southern California. But I maintained my position as the president of Right Response Ministries, which had already been separated before I left.
A lot of people said that. A lot of people said, they are trying to force a woke agenda into Acts 29, so we're going to bounce. Again, you can assume that was sincere. And then when he moves from California to go plant a church in Georgetown, Texas, not far from where he grew up, you can assume that he is being sincere when he says that California is not a place where he wants to raise a family. A lot of people have done that. It's called the big sort.
There's a growing trend of people self-sorting where they live based on their political and social views.
A lot of people have moved to go and live in what they believe to be safer communities and with a greater sense of solidarity and less hostile to their Christian values. But the problem is that comes along with a book deal. Fight by Flight, Why Leaving Godless Places is Loving Godless Places.
The whole premise is that I reject that what I see as being a false dichotomy, that it's either stay and fight or tuck your tail between your legs and flee.
Arguing in the book that staying in California would have been sin.
Can some people do it? Yes. Are 16 million professing Christians currently doing it in the state of California? No. And if they were to leave today, I think it would honor the Lord.
Around that time, around this season, he also begins to associate more heavily with certain figures in Reformed theology, more what some would say, and I wouldn't even say that all of these figures are the radical and extreme versions of Reformed theology, but guys like James White, and then your Jeff Durbins and your Doug Wilsons.
It's another episode of Theology Applied. I am your host, Pastor Joel Webbon with Right Response Ministries. In this episode, I am very privileged to welcome back for the 17th time, not quite that many, but certainly a regular guest, Pastor Doug Wilson, right? And so I keep wondering, what is he going to burn down next? And in this particular episode, I'm very privileged to have, for the first time, Vodi Bakum. Vodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
So it feels to some people like Acts 29 gives him a platform, and then he built on it, and now that he has a big enough following, he can roll on out. So you got Georgetown, Texas, Covenant Bible Church. You got Right Response Ministries. He's starting to put out more content online. And what I think that Joel found attractive was Doug Wilson's and Jeff Durbin's theonomic postmillennialism gave him more fuel and motivation to, we're bringing his theonomic postmillennialism is now enabling him to say, well, we're bringing the kingdom of Christ. And so I want to go plant a church, and I want a YouTube ministry to bring the kingdom of Jesus, and I want to start a Christian school, and I want to make films.
And our documentary is going to be on postmillennialism and theonomy, and we need your support.
We never got the movie, so where's the money, Joel? All this is happening around COVID, politically heated environment, things are crazy online, but Joel is definitely burrowing down into this association with theonomic postmillennialists and dominionists, interviewing them, and some of them sometimes repeatedly. Is he doing it because he's sincere or sneaky? That's a question in people's minds. You're certainly getting more attention online because you have James White in your thumbnail and you're interviewing him. You're certainly getting more attention because you have Joel Beakey
this evening. And the first question, just to help our audience get familiar with you, is who are you? And tell us a little bit about your ministry.
All right. Well, my name is Joel Beakey.
Can someone send this to Joel Beakey? And then enter stage right, Christian nationalism. By 2022, Joel starts to, I'm going to call it a shift. It's not necessarily a shift, but it's a strange kind of pivot. He at least becomes more of a crypto Reformed Baptist, and some might even say Reformed Baptist in name only. Rabino? Theonomy is still part of the picture, but it starts to get quieter and quieter what he believes about theonomy. And I can't get into it in this video, but that is because some of the assumptions built into a Christian nationalist system, which involves things like natural law and more Thomistic tendencies, has a more difficult time getting along with theonomy, which is built on knowledge and morality being hinged on the explicit commands of God in Scripture and in special revelation.
Joel Webbon is the senior pastor of Covenant Bible Church in Georgetown, Texas. You can find the website covenantbible.org, and he is president of Right Response Ministries.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I don't always write statements on Christian nationalism, but when I do, I steal people's font.
I don't always drink beer.
Baptist,
my friend.
Joel, and I gotta say, I mean, it's awkward and it's weird and it's kind of strange, but he has maintained both of those things in tension at times. And speaking of theonomy, less than he used to. This can account for why did the theonomy movie never came out? Because he secretly doesn't really want to be associated with theonomy anymore, but he hasn't been able to cut ties with that crowd yet. I don't know. But regardless, he is now, trying to adopt more and more tenets from Christian nationalism. And this actually starts with, my theory is that this actually starts with his relationship with
John Harris. He has a podcast that I'm familiar with called Conversations That Matter that I've been listening to, especially over the last month. And he's had a lot of great commentary in regards to social justice. John, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself to our guest.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Now, John Harris, who I'm going to say this, and this might upset some people, but he comes off to me as very sincere. His ideas are not my cup of tea, but I think that he really thinks that stuff.
Hey everyone, welcome once again to another installment of the Conversations That Matter podcast. I'm your host, John Harris, as always, and I have a special guest I'm excited to, well, I guess, not really introduce because Stephen's been on the program before, but for those who haven't heard those episodes, we have Stephen Wolfe with us today, who just released this book here, The Case for Christian Nationalism. But Stephen, thank you so much for being willing to talk about this and give some of your time to the audience here.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
My
I think
pleasure.
This is my third or fourth time.
But regardless, John Harris is associating with Stephen Wolfe. Joel Webbon begins associating with John Harris, and I think that relationship between the three of them just kind of blossoms very naturally. Next thing you know, not only does John Harris appear on his show repeatedly, but eventually Stephen Wolfe comes on, and the friendship kicks off. This opens up the door for the Ogden Boys with Sauvé. No way! Yes way. And not just the Ogden Boys, but the evangelical dark web with C.J. Engel, Andrew Isker. He's had him on the show a bunch of times. He has the Ogden Boys over. They start talking about Bigfoot, giants, mermaids.
And then when we got done, he said, Joel, you only beat me on one measurement, waist. And then I said, I bet you I beat you on two measurements, waist but also crotch.
With those relationships comes this growing sense of association like Joel Webbon has never experienced before. I mean, these guys are doing conferences together. They're speaking at each other's conferences. And then I don't know how to bring in this association, but then the Anons come into the picture and they start making X clips about White Boy Summer. And that kind of leads into the Antioch Declaration controversy, where Doug Wilson, who he's associated with in the past and with whom he is friends, now is like, hey, cut that out. And then they're like, no. And then this kind of develops over 2024. And eventually it results in the Antioch Declaration, where the guys, Moscow and friends, are like, well, we're going to write this statement. If you don't sign it, then you are like an anti-Semite, maybe. And that definitely led Joel and Wolf and the Ogden boys and Engel and those guys to go, we're not going to do this. We're not doing this. We're not going to sign your statement. We mostly agree with it, but why are you going to make us sign this statement? I've covered this controversy already on this channel. And then Allie Stuckey, she shouldn't be podcasting.
26 that Sunday. And so at the time in California, the Emperor Newsom, his benevolent majesty, was not allowing for churches to gather in any capacity.
I don't want to see women in the public sphere. You mean they shouldn't hold political office? Correct. You mean you don't want to see them podcasting? Correct.
No, we're on the front lines fighting the culture war, and women shouldn't be on here. Bro, it's a podcast, okay?
Which, she's a gigantic name, and of course, that's going to be good for him. So was that sincere? And it calls into question the sincerity of that association with Allie Stuckey when later he says what he says about her. People obviously want a pastor who knows what he believes. And if within 5 to 10 years you're changing your opinion so much, how can I trust that what you're saying about the Bible is true now if when my 1-year-old grows to 6 years old, you're going to be telling me that the way that I'm raising my children is sinful, but I'm doing what you told me to do 5 years ago? It's just not a strong sense of stability that people can feel when, whether it's in a church or they're listening to this guy on YouTube, they're getting his advice and then they begin to follow him and then he goes back on his word or changes his mind so dramatically that they feel like they can't follow him anymore. So right now, where he's at in this journey is, I imagine him like on a tightrope, trying to juggle these different associations because he has cut ties in some associational ways with Doug Wilson and friends, but he still calls himself a theonomist. So he's got theonomic associations kind of lingering. He's got the Christian nationalist card that he's kind of leaning more heavily into. And then there are allegations that I am going to cover further in a future video of him aligning with a podcast named the Stone Choir Podcast, which is an anti-Semitic podcast. They say the quiet part out loud. And they say things that Joel can't say. Because if he says them, then he would be cutting theological ties with the theonomy crew and maybe even some in the Christian nationalist crew. It's just going to be interesting to see how this develops, because if he goes any further toward the Stone Choir side, that could be difficult for him in his other associations. But if he backs away from Stone Choir any more than he kind of already has, saying, well, I don't think that Hitler was necessarily a Christian. I don't think that you can prove that. I don't personally believe that. That's not my view. And there are already comments that I'm seeing where guys who are Stone Choir boys or part of the Anon army are like, you need to change your mind about that. So it's like, feel like Joel is juggling different audiences, right? Now, I'm not going to dismiss Joel from his responsibility of holding to the positions that he is held to. He should still be held accountable, but I'm just going to say that there is an element to this in which the environment that Joel has found himself in is not his fault. He should have sought out legitimate ordination. If he did not, that's on him. However, Joel is able to come across information that pastors without rigorous pastoral training in the past may not have come across. And so if Joel Webbon is clout seeking and he has a tendency to see a big movement and want to join himself to it, you put that kind of personality in this tech age, yeah, you got the perfect storm. And when you're a good communicator, which he is, you got these other two guys that work for him at Right Response Ministries and do commentary with him. And so he's clearly able to like move movements forward. And so on top of all that perfect storm, it's like, well, this guy is good at what he does. And he doesn't have a confessional theological grid to see through the baloney. So for him, it's harder to fight that temptation to use theology as a means of winning battles, which I will point out, he has defined confessionalism as that.
I'm not trying to be rude, but we are out of time. We're in dire straits. We do not have time for you to spend 40 years and then come to the conclusion, oh, turns out confessional is the way to go. You say, well, I'm Calvinistic Baptist and not Reformed because I disagree with the Sabbath. That was cute during neutral world. You just don't get to do that anymore. We're not in neutral world. We are in a negative world. There are people who want to kill you. A confession is not something to work to. It's something to work from. It's the starting place. Your children can't afford for you to waste time.
And so already that starts to look like, okay, well then, are you sincerely believing this? And to me, when he says things like that, it doesn't seem like he does. And so therefore, when he associates with certain people, it seems like he's doing it as an opportunity. You can decide for yourself. So Joel's relationship with this information, technologically speaking, is less natural to come across this information than it used to be. And Joel's conclusions sure ain't Baptist. He's climbing this shaky ladder. At this point, he's walking a pretty tricky tightrope and juggling a lot of different associations and different theologies and different ideas. Next week, we're going to discuss in more depth his relationship with Stone Choir, if there is a legitimate relationship there or not, or what the evidence could be, and consider some of the allegations regarding that. But just for now, get rigorously pastorally trained. Stay confessional. Don't see confessionalism as a means of winning a cultural war. Hold to a confession because you believe it. Don't look for associations that are going to give you more of an audience and a bigger opportunity. And stay Baptist, my friends. Who isn't constantly changing with the times. No. Man, it's really hard. Man. Man, it's just almost impossible to find a pastor with a stone